Ansarullah Houthis announce agreement with Saudi Arabia to stop ongoing war in Yemen, according to Shafaq.com. The Yemeni group Ansarullah announced on Saturday that they had reached an understanding with Saudi Arabia to stop the ongoing war in Yemen and bring peace to the country. Mohammed al-Bukaiti, a member of the political bureau of Ansarullah, confirmed the agreement in an interview with the Al Mayadeen channel. The understanding includes all files related to the truce and achieving comprehensive and lasting peace. Ansarullah indicates that it will support any Saudi approach to peace with Yemen or other parties in the axis of resistance. The comprehensive solution will be in 2 stages, with the first stage expected to be before Eid al-Fitr. Al-Bukaiti denied the relationship between Ansarullah and the ongoing consultations in Riyadh between the Yemen Leadership Council and Saudi leadership regarding the Yemen file, stating that Saudi Arabia is a party to the war. The UAE's also started withdrawing its military forces from Yemen, with Ansarullah having almost certain information that it intends to keep some Yemeni islands, which Ansarullah does not accept, regarding the Yemeni dialogue. Al-Bukaiti called on Yemeni political components to accelerate dialogue with Sana'a to reach a Yemeni solution. He also revealed Western pressure led by the United States on Saudi Arabia and the UAE to continue the aggression and siege. Al-Bukaiti believed that the withdrawing the Saudi and Emirati forces and American, French, and British troops is necessary to achieve a comprehensive peace in Yemen. The ongoing war in Yemen, which began in 2015, has claimed the lives of 377,000 people, inflicted cumulative losses estimated at $126 billion on the Yemeni economy, and left 80% of the Yemeni people in need of humanitarian aid, according to the UN. The conflict has had devastating consequences to the Yemeni people, including a humanitarian crisis that has left millions of Yemenis facing severe food and water shortages, displacement, and disease outbreaks. The conflict has also resulted in significant damage to infrastructure and institutions, including hospitals and schools. From Tasnim News Agency, UAE withdraws from Yemen as Saudi Omani delegation arrives for ceasefire talks. The United Arab Emirates officially began withdrawing from Yemen, according to Mohammed al-Bukaiti, a senior member of Yemen's Ansarullah movement, and the government of Dhamar province. Al-Bukaiti announced that there's an understanding with Saudi Arabia regarding Yemen, with disclosing details. In an interview with Al Mayadeen, Al-Bukaiti stated that the UAE's participation with Saudi Arabia in the aggression against Yemen was a big mistake, and the UAE should learn the lesson and fully withdraw. Al-Bukaiti emphasized that any Saudi attempts to achieve peace with Yemen would strengthen the Saudi position. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and Oman are seeking to broker a ceasefire agreement between the warring parties in Yemen. A Saudi delegation led by Mohammed al-Jaber and accompanied by an Omani delegation is expected to arrive in the capital Sana'a in the next 2 days to hold discussions on fully reopening Yemeni ports and airports, paying public sector employees salaries, reconstruction, and political transition. Reuters reported that if an agreement is reached, the parties may announce it before the Eid al-Fitr holiday, which begins on April 20th. According to Al-Bukaiti, the conditions for achieving a ceasefire differ from those for achieving peace. The agreement on the ceasefire before Eid al-Fitr will be carried out in 2 stages, he explained. He also called on the Yemenis involved in the aggression not to miss the opportunity. Meanwhile, efforts to end the aggression on Yemen and lift the siege on it would continue through negotiations, according to Mohammed Abdul Salam, the spokesman for the Houthi Ansarullah movement and head of their negotiating delegation. Allah willing, the efforts will culminate in a peace agreement that meets the demands of the Yemeni people from Saada to Mara, he tweeted. Abdul Wahab al-Mabisi, a member of the Ansarullah Political Bureau, stressed that the Iranian-Saudi agreement is positive and will have an impact on the Yemeni people. Riyadh also reportedly informed the Presidential Council of its decision to end the war and close the Yemeni file permanently. From abonews.com, the Saudi-Yemeni war is likely to end after 8 years. And from the Kashmiriyat.co.uk, amid Saudi and Iran talks, 8-year-old Yemen war may end. Riyadh has informed the Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council of its decision to end the war and close the Yemen file once and for all, informed Yemeni news reporters said on Friday. Ashaq al-Awsat reported that new efforts are underway to resolve the Yemeni crisis as it enters its 9th year. An informed Yemeni source revealed to the source that a comprehensive peace document is being drafted. Sponsored by China, the finishing touches are being made to the draft that cover several phases. First phase of the peace would include a nationwide ceasefire, the reopening of all land, air, and sea routes, the merger of the central banks, and complete prisoner swap deals. Meanwhile, Saudi Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Salman reiterated the kingdom's constant support to Yemen. He held talks in Riyadh with the chairman of the Yemeni Presidential Leadership Council, Dr. Rashad al-Alimi. The minister underlined Saudi Arabia's backing of the work of the PLC as it pursues security and stability in Yemen. Pertinently, tens of thousands of civilians have been killed in Yemen during the last 11 years in Saudi bombings. Saudi claimed that it was fighting the Ansarullah coalition or government and Iran-backed militia and maintained it didn't attack any civilian areas. Children were the worst victims of the Saudi-led aggression. More than 80,000 children died of hunger in Yemen since 2015. Another 1.8 million children under 5 in Yemen are acutely malnourished, as per local NGOs in Yemen. To help end the Yemen war, all China had to do was be reasonable, according to The Intercept. With Joe Biden nowhere to be found, China's diplomacy set the stage for Saudi concessions and ceasefire talks. The war in Yemen looks like it's coming to an end. U.S. media reported on Thursday that a ceasefire extending through 2023 has been agreed to, but those reports also include Al-Ansarullah government denials. On Friday, Al-Mayadeen, a generally pro-Ansarullah Lebanese news outlet, reported optimism from the Ansarullah side that the deal's real and the war is winding down. Reuters later on Friday matched Al-Mayadeen's reporting, confirming that Saudi envoys will be traveling to Sana'a to discuss the terms of a permanent ceasefire. What's startling here is the apparent role of China and complete absence of the U.S. and President Joe Biden in the deal-making. Biden promised to end the war in Yemen 2 years into his presidency. China may have delivered on that promise, said Trita Parsi, executive vice president of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Decades of militarized American foreign policy in the Middle East have enabled China to play the role of peacemaker, while Washington stuck and unable to offer much more than arms deals and increasingly unconvincing security assurances. The U.S. always backed Saudi Arabia to the hilt and vociferously opposed the Ansarullah, who are backed by Iran. Now China has extracted concessions from the Saudis that made the ceasefire talks possible. The Saudis seem like they're fully capitulating to the Ansarullah demands, which include opening the major port to allow critical supplies into the country, allowing flights into Sana'a, and allowing the government to have access to its currency to pay its workers and stabilize the economy. Reasonable stuff. The Saudi concessions, including a potential lifting of the blockade and exit from the war, demonstrate that their priority is to protect Saudi territory from attack and focus on economic development at home, said Eric Sperling, executive director of Just Foreign Policy, which has been working for an end to the war in Yemen for years. This diverges from the approach preferred by many Washington foreign policy elites who continue to hope that the Saudi war and blockade could force the Ansar Allah government to make concessions and cede more power to the U.S.-backed Yemeni government. The Yemen deal is undergirded by another China-brokered deal for rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. On Thursday, the Iranian and Saudi foreign ministers met in Beijing to finalize an agreement that reinstates direct flights between Riyadh and Tehran, reopens embassies, and expands commercial cooperation. The full scope of this appears to have been unlikely without the Saudi-Iranian normalization brokered by China, Parsi said. Whether China played a crucial role in the Yemeni dimension is unclear. Beijing will, however, get some credit for it because of its role in bringing Riyadh and Tehran together. U.S. policy toward the Yemen conflict has been so hostile to peace it managed to do the impossible, make Saudi Arabia appear reasonable in comparison. The Wall Street Journal reported Thursday that the U.S. is deeply frustrated at how reasonably various parties are behaving. In an unannounced visit to Saudi Arabia earlier this week, CIA Director William Burns expressed frustration with the Saudis. According to people familiar with the matter, he told Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman that the U.S. has felt blindsided by Riyadh's rapprochement with Iran and Syria, countries that remain heavily sanctioned by the West. Under the auspices of Washington's global rivals, this is all part of a larger program of Chinese diplomacy, as opposed to U.S. saber-rattling in the Middle East. The Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said publicly that he's also held an expansive, 2-hour meeting with his French counterpart while she was also in China. The meetings came ahead of a planned regional summit that will be organized by China and include both Saudi Arabia and Iran. With the Saudis no longer backing militants in the Yemen war, those rump factions won't have much capacity left to fight, though there will still probably be some clashes before a final peace is reached. Some observers say or have said that U.S. could still aid efforts to bring the war to its ultimate close. Now is the time for the United States to do everything it can to support these negotiations to finally end the war and support robust humanitarian funding to address the suffering of the Yemeni people, said Hassan al-Tayyab, the legislative director for Middle East policy at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. If Washington rejects regional power sharing and obstructs a world in which other nations have a vested interest in peace, it risks jeopardizing America's own economic and security interests and its international reputation. Now's the time to prioritize and reap the benefits of diplomacy, not reject those who advocate for it. The way the war is ending also underscores just how illegitimate the U.S.-backed government of Yemen has been the last several years. In reality, its group of exiles living in hotels in Riyadh, fully propped up by and under the thumb of Saudi Arabia. For a while, Saudi Arabia was referring to it in official documents as the legitimate government of Yemen, though it didn't actually govern and had no legitimacy outside its hotel. The exiled government's now led by the Presidential Leadership Council, and look at how the news is delivered to the legitimate government of Yemen, according to Al-Mayadeen. The sources stated that Riyadh informed the Presidential Leadership Council of its decision to end the war and conclude the Yemeni file permanently. Such was the ignoble end of the U.S.-recognized government of Yemen. The Saudis are smart to cut their losses in their complicity in this human rights nightmare and refocus their attention to their own economic development. While the Houthis are a deeply flawed movement, it's both immoral and ineffective to try to counter them by pushing tens of millions of Yemenis to the brink of starvation, said Sperling. The Saudis are smart to cut their losses in their complicity in this human rights nightmare and refocus their attention to their own economic development. The Chinese may find, however, that running a constellation of satellites is harder than it looks, and that brokering peace may be more difficult than keeping it. This week, Iran-allied groups in Lebanon launched airstrikes on Zionist-occupied Palestine in response to A raid on Al-Quds Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque by Zionist police. Zionist-occupied Palestine, which has moved increasingly closer to Saudi Arabia, responded to the rockets by attacking both Gaza and Lebanon. President Xi Jinping will have no shortage of disputes to work out at his upcoming summit. And from globalvillagespace.com, Islamic world should be united against. Actually, watch this space. We're going to transition to another story. Remember, your engagement through a like, a share, and a sub will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before.